You know, there's a pretty good chance you're wearing it right now. It's in your clothes, your car's seatbelts, maybe even the water bottle on your desk. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on polyester. It's a material so common, we barely even notice it. We're going to uncover the massive global machine that takes it from crude oil to your closet, and now how that same machine is trying to take it all the way back again.
So yeah, the answer is, of course, polyester. This stuff is so deeply woven into the fabric of our modern lives, and I mean that literally and figuratively, that we often just overlook the colossal, invisible industry that's cranking it out 24/7 all around the world.
And when I say colossal, I am not exaggerating. By 2025, the world will have the capacity to produce 122 million tons of purified terephthalic acid, or PTA, which is the absolute core ingredient for polyester. To try and put that into perspective for you, that's like the weight of over 300 Empire State Buildings made every single year. It's just a staggering scale.
So in this explainer, we're going to walk through 4 key chapters. First, we'll really dig into the scale of this invisible giant. Then, we'll break down the chemistry of how it's actually made. After that, we'll get into the massive shift towards recycling. And finally, we'll take a look at what the future might hold for this absolutely essential material.
All right, so let's start by pulling back that curtain. You have to understand the polyester value chain isn't just a bunch of factories. It's this highly integrated global system that turns a raw resource into the products we all use every single day.
At its heart, the traditional way of doing things is a straight line, a 4-step journey. It all starts with crude oil, which gets refined to produce something called paraxylene, or PX. That PX is then oxidized to create purified terephthalic acid, PTA. And then finally, that PTA gets combined with another chemical, MEG, to create the final polymer, PET, which is the material we all know as polyester. But what's really fascinating here is where all this happens. This is not some globally distributed industry. No, it is a powerhouse, and it's almost entirely concentrated in one region. I mean, just look at this. Over 90% of the world's entire PTA capacity is in the Asia-Pacific. Think about what that means. That kind of concentration gives the region immense control over the global supply chain, and that influences everything from the price of your t-shirt to the biggest strategic decisions of the world's biggest brands.
Okay, let's dive into our second section and really see how this works on a chemical level. We're going to break down the journey from a barrel of oil all the way to a spool of thread.
It all starts with this one molecule, paraxylene, or PX. It's what's called an aromatic hydrocarbon, and it comes from crude oil refining. And its purpose in life is incredibly specific. A mind-boggling 98% of all the PX produced on the entire planet has just one destination: to be turned into PTA. This makes the PX to PTA relationship one of the most tightly knit chemical supply chains in the world.
And this table here really shows you the precise recipe. The conversion process is just incredibly efficient. So to make 1 ton of PTA, you need just a little over half a ton of PX. Then, to make 1 ton of the final PET polymer, you need about 0.86 tons of that PTA, and you mix it with about 0.34 tons of something called monoethylene glycol, or MEG. It's a super optimized industrial-scale chemical reaction that's been perfected over decades. But here's the thing, not all polyester is created equal. The same basic polymer, PT, can be engineered for totally different purposes. The polyester filament yarn in your shirt, for example, is all about comfort and how it looks. But the industrial yarn using something like a seatbelt or a tire cord, well, that's engineered for pure performance. It has to have immense strength, minimal stretch, and be super resistant to heat and impact. This versatility is really the key to why we see it everywhere.
And that brings us to maybe the biggest shift this industry has seen in decades, the circularity challenge. For about a century, this has been a one-way street, right? From crude oil to the consumer, and that's it. Well, now, recycling is fundamentally disrupting that entire model.
So what's driving this big change? Well, a huge part of it is pressure from the market itself. The world's largest consumer brands, your Cokes, your Pepsis, your Nestle's, they've all made these very public, very aggressive commitments to use a lot more recycled PET, or rPET, in their packaging. And that sends a super powerful demand signal all the way down the supply chain. And honestly, the environmental argument is a total knockout. I mean, just look at the difference here. Making polyester from recycled materials slashes the carbon footprint by 70 to 80% compared to making it from crude oil. For these global brands that are under all this pressure to meet sustainability targets, a number like that, well, it isn't just a goal, it's a massive, undeniable reason to change.
And it's not just corporate pledges. Governments are now stepping in and creating legally binding demand.
From the European Union to California to South Korea, we're seeing regulations that mandate minimum percentages of recycled content in plastic bottles. And these aren't just suggestions, right? They are actual laws that are forcing the industry to adapt and build out a really robust supply chain for this recycled PET.
But here's the critical catch. Not all polyester is recycled equally. See, we've gotten pretty good at recycling clear plastic bottles, but our clothes, that is a whole different ballgame. Less than 2% of the polyester used in our clothing is currently made from recycled materials. And why is that? Well, a simple t-shirt is just way more complex than a bottle. It's often blended with other fibers like cotton or spandex. That is dyes, chemical coatings, zippers, buttons. Trying to separate all that stuff is a huge technical and logistical nightmare that the industry is really only just beginning to tackle.
All right, let's move to our final section and see how all this is building toward the future. Because what we're seeing isn't a simple replacement of the old with the new. Instead, it looks like what's emerging is this really complex, kind of hybrid model.
This timeline really captures the central tension in the industry today perfectly. On one hand, you have recycling mandates getting stricter and stricter, like the EU's requirements kicking in for 2025 and again in 2030. But on the other hand, you have these massive, brand-new facilities to produce virgin polyester from crude oil that are still being built. We're talking multi-million-ton plants scheduled for 2026 and 2027. So the industry is basically betting on both horses at the same time.
And then you have the wild cards. External shocks can totally change the game. So take this scenario from the source report. A hypothetical conflict in 2026 sends oil prices soaring. All of a sudden, the cost of making virgin polyester just skyrockets. Overnight, recycled PET doesn't just look environmentally friendly, it becomes the much cheaper, more economically competitive option. Geopolitics can end up accelerating this green transition in ways that policy alone just can't.
So, we really have to end with this question. The entire polyester value chain, this whole global machine, was engineered over a century for just one thing: incredible one-way efficiency. So the challenge now is whether this massive, deeply entrenched industrial giant can fundamentally re-engineer itself for a circular future. The answer to that is going to define the next chapter for the material that literally surrounds us all.
If you really want to go deeper on this, the full report from HDIN Research is absolutely packed with data, market forecasts, and some incredibly detailed analysis. You can find it right on their website. Thanks for watching.